And the only thing that stayed with me was thanksgiving. I thought, well, should we just let the congregation give thanks then? Because no text presented itself. No chapter presented itself. Even for the reading, I thought, well, I'd take the simplest of readings, a reading that many of us would know. But the only thing that came each and every time was this singular word, thanksgiving. And so that's where we are this morning. I took the liberty of looking at what the Hebrew word was, just to find out what it meant. And it means to extend the hand. And I immediately thought, because this word thanksgiving, exactly the same word, is remember when we did the peace offering, how in the peace offering, there are a number of participants in the meal. God is one. He's the host. The worshipper is another. And then the priest is another. And then those who the worshipper invites. And I immediately thought this thanksgiving is an extension of the hand. Exactly what I thought. But you see, built into this word, it breathes openness. It breathes informality. It breathes welcome, this word. And yet the thing is, well, it's difficult sometimes. I'm not the brightest bulb in the house type of thing. And it's difficult sometimes to try and encapsulate what the word covers. But it means to throw or to cast. So it can't mean that. The extension of the hand, like that, as I would think it. In fact, when you stop and think of it, that's a very westernized idea of meeting, isn't it? You know, we still keep them at arm's length, don't we? Even though we offer and extend the hand. In the East, they embrace. We find it when we look at, with Paul, greet one another with a holy kiss. And then J.B. Phillips, he puts it in his English translation, make sure everyone has a jolly good handshake. It's a lovely way of but it shows the difference, doesn't it? So whilst it might mean horizontally an extension of the hand, really it means to throw or to cast. And so whether you throw underarm or whether you throw overarm, it's the same every time. Watch what happens when I throw underarm. It's upward. Watch when I throw overarm. And so this thanksgiving is a lifting of hands. A lifting of hands. We sing that song, don't we? Let us lift up holy hands and magnify his name and worship him. But that's what this word, the Hebrew word, literally means. It means to throw or to cast at. And whether you do it like that, do both hands together, or whether you do it like that, both hands up. And it's used in 3 areas. And again, it's fascinating where they're used. The first place it's used is with our English word, confession. And so when Joshua said to Achan, remember Achan in chapter 7 of Joshua had stolen those things? And this is what Joshua said to him. He said, Achan, give God the glory. Confess your sin. That's what he would have done. There would have been a throwing up of arms in his confession of sin. It's amazing what a hand can do. When Barbara's husband, Ray Palmer, dropped Barbara off just out the front end, he came round the back and I went like that. Where? He slammed the brakes on. He thought I was saying halt. There was a screech. It's amazing what the hand can do, isn't it? how we can isolate, how we can intimidate, how we can welcome, how we can greet someone, how we can, with the same sign, wave goodbye. The hand does so many things. I'm sure Leanne Jordan, Steve's daughter, will be able to share so much about what the hands can do. Joyce's friend Jill could go around the world sharing with what the hands can do to those who are deaf or are hard of hearing, and their hands speak. But here, in confession, your hands can lift. That's what I mean. It breeds openness. I remember Jean Oliver, the lady that was a member here that used to be a missionary in Nigeria. She talked of a time when a number of campuses or a number of, what do they call them, where the mission station was. The Spirit of God began to move in those places. Not in hers initially. And she talked of how it spread. And there were workers and members of the congregation, she said. We were so resilient to the workings and the promptings of the Holy Spirit. So resilient, hard-hearted, feet stuck in. We weren't going to budge. But she said, the Spirit of God moved. And one by one, confessions were made of sin. And often, they would be with lifted hands. Lifted up. And confess. Sometimes, don't we? We find it in the Roman church. They go into a little confession box. And they mutter away. Privately, quietly. But you see, when the Spirit of God moves, this extending the hand can move upon each and every one so that we become open before Him. Because it leaves you open when you've got hands, I guess, doesn't it? You know, if anybody wants to hit you in the solar plexus there, just underneath the rib cage, that's the time to do it. Because you're completely open. You've got no defense. And then another thing that it means simply thanksgiving. I give you thanks, Lord. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for His mercy endures forever. In Psalm 95 it says, let us come into His presence with thanksgiving, with extended hands. Let us shout joyfully to Him in psalms. Sounds a bit like Paul, doesn't it? Psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. And then the reading that Ruth kindly took for us. We sing it as a chorus, don't we? In fact, the chorus, the words of the chorus stick more in our mind than the actual psalm itself, because we've added a few things to it. Enter His gates with thanksgiving, and into His courts with praise. That's that word. Enter His gates with thanksgiving. I remember me and Mike Thomas, we went to a mission. It was Cambodia for Christ. Some of you might remember that. Cambodia for Christ. It was started in the work in the 70s, just before the end of the Cambodian Vietnamese war with America. And I remember we went in, and in the evening service, it was up in Whitchurch in Shropshire, an absolutely stunning place. And we went in, and when I was looking through the door, I said, oh, Mike, what have we done? And there was this guy in the front with an Hawaiian shirt on. So remember, this was the 80s, right? And it was a Hawaiian shirt on, and his hands were up in the air. And I thought, what we done by you now, mate? Do you know, that brother was so open. You sat there after, or through the service, and you just felt an openness in the service. Such an openness. A sense of thanksgiving there at the beginning of the service already, with hands raised, with his coloured shirt on, as it was. It stood out like a banner. It stood out so much. But you sat there and you felt it breathes informality. I don't mean contempt, familiarity that bred contempt. I don't mean that. Just that informality, that sense of welcome, that sense of being greeted, warmth. So it means that as well. So a confession can change to thanksgiving. And we understand that, don't we? When you've been forgiven, you understand what it is. When you've spoken to the Lord, some of us might confess publicly of the wrongs that we did before we became a Christian. Some of us might have done that. Some of you might have done acts of various sorts, returning things you'd stolen to those that once owned them. Those type of things. But we all come together, whether it's private or public, we come together in this of giving thanks, of being set free. And you thank God for it. The other time that it's used. And again, this sense of I try to explain. I've been doing studies over at Penyrheol Road, where Alan Penrose worships on a Thursday night. And we did the peace offering. And I tried to explain them how informal it all was. So informal. In the very courtyard where God's brazen altar was. It was in that place, and yet we find that there were confessions there. Because a reason for the peace offering was this, thanksgiving. And that word can be translated into 3 English words: confession, thanksgiving, or a singing choir. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine walking into the courtyard where that is so somber, so holy, that the priests are so conscious of everything, washing every time that they have to wash, being prepared in the right way, dressed properly, standing there waiting to minister, and someone stands up and starts to sing, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren," and the whole congregation that's gathered with this peace offering stands up to give praise to God. I was up there when Nita used to do it. Remember Sarah from Kennedy? Remember her son was, he was a young lad, but he was a big lad. Can you remember Sarah from Kennedy? She wouldn't tell us her surname because her uncle had a name for fighting down the Boar's Head. Her uncle had a name for fighting down the Boar's Head. It's not her name now, that was her maiden name. But her dad was out here just now. I was talking to Roger and Dorothy. And Peter was in school with me. She was ashamed of his dad's name. He was all right. Peter's always been quiet. He was in school the same year as me. But I remember, he said out there this one, "Do you know," he said, "you're not in there can have sing, can't you?" So I said, "Oh, I said, well, why don't you come along this Christmas? I'll come and..." He said, "I might do." But he said, "I heard you singing. You were singing how great thou art." And he said, "I come in at the top, and I could hear you up there." And he was still singing. I thought, well, wait, there's only 3 verses. So we must have sung the chorus a few times. It's got its advantages. So he's come in now. And he said, "I've never heard anybody sing it like that. Not even John Alexander, whoever he is. Some of you might know who he is, a famous singer." He said, "I've never heard anybody sing it like that." Do you know? It can start with a confession. It can move to thanksgiving. But in the end, it can be a choir singing thanksgivings to God with hands raised. In Nehemiah, chapter 12, there's 2 walls. One going there, one going there. One to the right, one to the left. And it says, there were 2 companies of them that gave thanksgivings. There's that word. If you look in your Strongs, you'll find in the concordance one of the meanings for this Hebrew word, a company of them that gave thanks. And he says in chapter 12, there was a great company that stood in the house of the Lord and gave thanks. Wouldn't it be a marvelous thing if as a congregation we would be free to. I read this morning in a book I'm reading, strange, I should read it today. His message was this to 1,000 ministers and 1,000 senior workers. Open your heart. Open your heart. In Judges chapter 5, Deborah says this in her song. She says, when leaders lead, the people give themselves willingly. But in your margin, if you've got a New King James, it puts a very insightful phrase that puts in there, when locks are unlocked, the people give themselves willingly. Are we locked up this morning? Could we confess? Could we give thanks? Could we sing? Did you watch that program last night with Darcy Bustle? You know, the ballerina? Retired now. Of how in dance, Naomi met her the other day. In Peacocks. Was it Peacocks? Bon Marsh, the posher version. Primark. There we are. Back down to... But she was in Primark. But she had a program on last night about dance and its effects. And there was a boy there that was severely tested with depression. And the diagnosis that he was given. He turned to dance. And there was a group of girls there, and one or two boys that joined in, suffering with nerves, ill health, mental problems, mental health problems. And he expressed himself in a dance of how he came to this point where he was set free. And he expressed it in a dance. So I was looking at it and thinking, well, this seems a bit odd. But that's the way he opened himself to express to his mother, who had supported him through it all, this is what it was like now. And so when one was standing there, he would look at them and he would feel threatened by them. And he'd go to move towards them, but then fear would make him step, and he'd go exactly the same. And in the end, he found himself rolling on the floor, completely out of control, expressing what had gone on. Now, that's how I felt. But I'm free now, because I've been able to express it. And some of the individuals were poor girls that suffered so much with being locked up. And they stood in front of their parents and their brothers and their sisters and gave this performance of dance. And their mum was so proud. One girl's name was this Carrier. It's in Manchester. I think that means lovely, doesn't it? Does it mean lovely, Carrier? Is it lovely? Was it? Love, is it? That's a lovely name. We're going to another, you know. Lovely. But she found release. Now, I'm not looking for you to stand and dance. No, I don't mean that. But to open the heart. At some point, the heart has to open, or it will remain forever shut. What a terrifying thought. What a terrifying thought. It has to open, or it will remain forever shut. Open your heart. Extend your hands. And if need be, feel free to confess. If need be, feel free to give thanks. If need be, may we join you as a choir and sing with hands extended to our King. A simple phrase, but there we are.